this came from thebalancedcareers.com, which is a fabulous website to check out. It sort of gives you a little bit of everything. But this would be maybe your branding statement that would go on your resume. It could also go on your LinkedIn profile.
So if you're a new grad, it's going to be maybe shorter, but that's okay. The idea is to give them specifically what you're actually looking for. All right, and then the next one, again, a short phrase or sentence to talk about somebody. Here's a person that has years of experience in software support, an IT person. And changing careers, often a difficult one. Some of you might be doing that or looking for something different. So the idea of transferable skills, we'll talk about that later on, right, Joan?
Right, yes, we'll get to that shortly.
Yeah, so here's an example of somebody moving from one area to another. And this sets the stage, obviously, with the employer thinking about, will you fit in with that particular job? So those are kind of what we would call summary or opening statements. Joan, you want to talk about keywords now? If you know about this, great. If you don't, take good notes.
This will help you. One of the problems is it's so easy. Well, like we'll get to that later, but these are your skills or abilities that are mentioned in the job post. So that this is what the hiring manager is looking for.
And this is really an important aspect in case it goes through what they call a applicant tracking system, which we'll be talking about as well. And a human being doesn't even see your resume and cover letter. And it gives you a score and so on, which you'll see here. So this is an important concept in many cases, the idea of keyword. And here we are. So Joan, why don't you kind of cover?
These are examples. First, you look at what the job is asking for, and then you pick out the skills that the hiring manager is looking for and that you have. So it's fairly simple, but it helps let them know that you're qualified for the job.
Right. So in the red there, you can see where some of those key factors might come to play when you're writing a statement or writing your resume, to get that into the text so that the person sees you've actually looked at the jobs posting and you're matching up what you have to offer with the job posting.
And because this area is so, people speak multiple languages, you really need to mention it. And here, maybe, do you want some people to come up with what their keywords are? How do you want to handle this?
Yeah, so if you have some paper right now, or however you're doing this session, here's a chance for you to look at your background and what you want to mention in terms of what you offer, sort of your keywords. And this comes from education, work experience, skills. And it can include if you're a homemaker or a new student graduate, you don't have a lot of experience maybe in a field, take a look at those transferable skills. We'll be talking about them later on that you want to mention. So jot down 5 or 6 of those as we go along. What do you have to offer related to that job? So here we go. So this is now, we're going to get into this whole idea why this is important on your resume. Because
it's so easy to online apply for a job. And in fact, I don't know what it is, 60% of the jobs aren't never even advertised online. But if they are, no one wants to read 200 resumes. So it goes through an applicant tracking system. And they're looking for the keywords.
And so when you do this, the system, applicant tracking system, will look at a couple of different ways of your keywords. Either they're actually on the document, the cover letter, resume, for example, or they are mentioned as they are relevant to the position you're applying to. And that's how you're going to get a score in applicant tracking system. And that's how the hiring manager would get a score, and that person would decide, like, if maybe there's 100 resumes and I want the top 5 scores. So let's say it's 0 to 100 points. You want to get as close to 100 as you can. And so it's important to be aware of this. The employer is not going to tell you they're doing this, right? It's not obvious that they do search of resumes this way, but you should be, as a candidate, an applicant, you should be aware of this.
And this is
So,
a good
Joan, you want to
resource.
mention about JobScan? Yeah.
Yes. So what you do, I think there are multiple, but this is a good example. You paste or upload your resume, you paste the job description, and then it'll calculate what percentage, how close you are to those skills. And this is a really good way of checking before you send out a resume.
Right. And there are many sites like this out there, applicant tracking system, ATS, and it'll say how to beat that or how to beat the computer system they're using in the company. So
I think
jobscan.co.
I think the first few are free, and then after a while, they might make you pay for it. I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's not real expensive, but it can really help you have a chance at getting in the interview, because remember, the next step is always the interview. Okay, so now we're going to go into different types of resumes. Now that we have a sense, or you have a sense, that keywords can really play a big factor. It's not just how pretty it looks, but what's actually on there, the content. So here's an example of a chronological resume. So Joan, you want to kind of go through what's on here?
We recommend, this is good if you've not had any significant unemployment gaps, or if you're applying for a job in the same field. And I know it's hard, but you should really keep it to one page. Even if you've worked for 30 years, just put the most recent jobs that are more applicable to the job you're applying for. And if you notice, we do the summary, which we talked about, or your brand statement, the employment history, educations, hobbies and interests only if they apply to the job, and your professional skills.
So you can see on this is a good example of what you would put on a one-page, we hope it's going to be a one-page resume. And you'll see at the top, all you really need nowadays is your email and phone. And then if you have a LinkedIn profile, and we're going to talk about LinkedIn later on, you'll notice the headings are in bold and caps, summary, employment history, and so on. And there are bullet points to illustrate what you've actually done, your accomplishments, and so on. So it makes it easy for the employer to read this, or an applicant system to read it quickly and get a sense, are you somebody they'd want to call for an interview or bring you in for an interview? So it's clean. You'll notice there's white space. Watch out for your spelling and grammar. That never changes, right?
And unless you're a graphic designer, keep it simple.
Right, because, yeah.
These automatic tracking systems can't read it other than that.
Yeah, so you may have that question in your mind, well, can I have a really nice scroll or colors or whatever? And what we're saying is, yes, you can, of course, but if it's an applicant tracking, like you apply online and you don't even know where it's going when you send it in, if you use that, the system may not be able to read it. It may give you a 0 score, so you're not going to get a call. So this one here, this format, is very straightforward and simple, and an applicant tracking system could actually read it easily and give you a score.
The reason we don't
keep that in mind.
Yeah, and unless you're applying for a job, say in the city of Chicago, if you live in Chicago, it might help. Otherwise, they really don't care where you live.
Yeah, the address isn't always necessary on a resume anymore. The other thing, and Joan and I have both seen this, and I just had one this morning actually, and with a student I work with, references. You don't really need to put references on your resume anymore. That's a separate document with your heading like on here, the John Doe heading, and then below that, your 1, 2, 3, hopefully references with their name and title, contact information. And you want to, of course, line those references up ahead of time. So if you're thinking, how do I fit references on there? Don't worry about it. You don't really have to have them on your resume. So keep that in mind.
Okay.
Let's go ahead then to, okay, now this is a little different, Joan. This is called the skills or functional.
And this is recommended if you're switching careers or you've been out of the workforce for a while. And here we get to the transferable skills. Again, your transferable skills need to be in line with the job posting, but you put that up first. Your work experience, only put the jobs that are comparable to what you're applying for. You don't need to keep it simple, keep it short.
Right.
And
And
again, keep it to one page.
yeah, one page, and you'll notice how the skills are now towards the top of the resume, because what we're going to tell you is that most people, human beings in this country anyway, read from the top down. So if a human being is looking at this, like a recruiter, they're going to skim it. They'll give you 10 seconds, maybe 30 seconds at the most. They'll look from the top down and left to right. So what you put at the top will be your contact information, the most important part. And then in this case, the skills-based, that's what you want to do. And again, like we're saying, the whole idea of keywords, those skills have to match as much as you can what they're looking for in the job. So you look at the job description and say, aha, they need this kind of software, I need to know this language. That will help you decide even whether you want to apply or not, right? Because you have to have what they're looking for. So this is called a skills-based or functional resume. Okay. So what are the skills?
Yes, these are the transferable skills. And there are more than that, but we did a rough communication skills, research, leadership. I mean, these are all important, and you would put in, and even if you haven't worked in the field, you still might have good communication skills, research skills, and so forth.
Right. So you can Google this one too, and look it up. I'm a big fan of What Color Is Your Parachute by Richard Bowles, and of course the library has that book, and that's one you might want to take a look at, because the book will actually have you do exercises, and it'll force you to think about, well, what do I have to offer? What are my skills? So it's not just job related, but you can see many different, there's basically more than 100 different kinds of these skills, but how you list it on the resume is in the bullet points there, see? So you think about how you're going to write that into your resume. So what you would do is an assessment ahead of time before you even write a resume. Just lay it out ahead of, what are all my transferable skills? And then you pull the ones that match the job and put them on your resume. So it's a way for you to think maybe a little differently than you have been, especially if you're changing career fields. Oh my goodness, right, Joan? I mean, changing career fields can be a challenge. So this is one that we think is really important that you always keep in mind. And again, like I say, these are just some examples of what we call transferable skills. Okay, so here are some ways now to look at headings, right, Joan?
Right, and again, whether it's chronological or skills-based, you still need your name, your LinkedIn profile, your phone, your email, and your phone number. It's pretty simple.
Right, and that's going to go at the top. And Joan can certainly mention here too, I'm a big fan of keeping all of the font size on your resume the same.
Yes.
Maybe make your name a little bigger, but 11 or 12 point font size is just fine, and it's easy to read. Joan, thoughts on that?
I agree. I see resumes that their name is in, 24 or 36 point font, and it's just silly. It's
right.
not.
So right, because that's the thing you want them to remember is your name right away.
Right.
Okay, now.
And these are two examples for someone changing careers. They have a short review of their transferable skills and seeking a new job in the same field. So this would be based on the job you're applying for. If the job is called customer service, we'll put that in the headline, you're a customer service professional or accounts receivable analyst. So one is more of a summary of your transferable skills, and the other one is, well, it's easier if you're going in the same field. It's pretty easy to.
So keep that in mind. And over on the one with the accounts receivable analyst, this person has included one of my favorite words on resumes, successful. You'll notice successful record of improving cash flow. That's an accomplishment. So if you have accomplishments, you want to somehow mention that in your resume, and of course, maybe in your cover letter too, because that shows you have good self-confidence in yourself, you've accomplished something, and you're telling them, if I did it at company X, I could do it at your company Y. It would transfer over. So I really like the word successful when you can work it in.
And when you can prove
My
it.
key word there. Anyway, okay, so let's go ahead. Now, here's something a little different.
He was starting with your current job, reverse chronologically. Now, even if you've worked in the field for a long time, you don't need to, I don't know where the cutoff, but certainly no more than 10 years. It's none of their business how old you are. So you don't have to put every job you've ever had.
So I like where it says employment history, I use the word relevant employment or relevant employment history. You're telling them these are the jobs you've had that you think match what they're looking for. It's develop your skills and experience and so on that are related to that. That's a very common question, right, Joan? Well, I have to show everything. I said, no, you don't. You don't really.
But also, if you're going to talk about accomplishments, it's good to put in specifics. Like on the other resume we just saw, he said he did 80 calls a day. It's important. Or if you increase cash flow, if you have a percentage, put that in too. So we try to use action verbs and quantities. Make sure that you're giving them, you're not only successful, but you're proving that you've been successful.
Right. So the idea would be, as you'll see on this example here, quantities and amounts show success in their own way, that you actually accomplished something. Now, here's one, if you happen to be in media, because I have worked in media for a number of years there, the little bullet points on the right of the screen where it says accomplishments, achievements, and so on. Sometimes you can, what they call hyperlink your words to your either portfolio, if you have one, or your LinkedIn profile to show off what you've done. And what it does, it is easier for the employer to just click on that on their screen, on that hyperlink, and jump right to your portfolio or LinkedIn profile to see your work.
Jerry,
yes.
One of the examples, if you have your own website, it's a great way of doing it, but you can also just put it right on your LinkedIn profile. You could click on it and it comes up.
So think about that as a way to make it easy for the employer to see how good you are, what you have done. So if you have, even if it's in a different field, it shows results, it shows success. So keep that in mind, possible hyperlink. Okay, let's move ahead.
Okay, this is an example of transferable skills. And in this particular case, he used communication, leadership, self-discovery, and thinking.
So you can see here, again, you can do columns on a resume like this, the bullet points. The applicant tracking system may not read it well. Be aware, columns on resumes, or if you turn the resume, right, instead of the profile and have it in a landscape format, it looks pretty, I know, but be careful on that with the columns. Usually applicant tracking systems read just one column of information at a time. So when you do this, it's great for a person, a human being, to look at your skills here. Wow, look at all this stuff. But a machine, an applicant tracking software system, might not work as well. So this is where you edit down to what are the 5 or 6 main key skills I want to pitch. Okay, so that's something you just need to be aware of when you do the resume. Okay, Joan, education.
Well, education is pretty simple. You don't have, you put your highest degree, you don't have to put, unless your high school or your associate or a certificate. And you don't have to put the date. No one cares. It's none of their business when you graduated. I think.
And that's all, yes. And for those of you who are like myself, a senior person or an honored person, as we would say, right, Joan?
Or an old codger, as my husband calls it. Either way.
Yeah. That's an eternal battle of how old you are.
Yes.
And so again, like Joan is saying, you really, if you went to Oakton and you got a degree some year, now if it's recent, that's great. You can put it. I got it in 2019. I did a
Right.
web development or whatever. That's fine. But if you went to like Boston University and graduated in the year 2000 or 2005, maybe not so much. It's more about where you went to school and what you learned, what you're using now. Let them decide about the age question
Right.
rather than kind of shooting yourself in the foot, so to speak, at the start by telling them when you graduated from high school or college. Don't always have to do that. On the other hand, if you're a recent grad, like we may be talking to some recent grads here, you definitely do want to put it on. So within the last 5 or 6 years, if you finished somewhere and you want to put it on there, that's great. And you certainly can put your high school, your GED, absolutely.
Yes.
And again, depending on what the job is requiring, you can put your high school on there, Niles West or whatever, and what year, if you won honors and awards. So on the education for new grads, if you're out there, yeah, if you want to do the GPA, yeah, you can put that on there if it's a B average, generally a 3.0 on a 4.0 scale. If it's below that, you don't really want to emphasize that, probably leave it off. Also, if you are in honors, you won honors and awards, that sort of thing, it might help you as a new grad.
Yes, right.
Yeah. So think about it in a different way if you're a younger person that maybe just graduated in the last few years or just last year. But this is a part people always ask about, what do I put on that? And you don't have to put I had a guy today, he had 5 different items for education and only 2 of them applied. So we shrunk it down from 5 to 2. So if you have gotten training everywhere in the world, that's great. But remember, you're trying to get an interview here, cut it down to what the employer is asking for. What is the job requirement? That's the key thing.
And these
And
are
we have new additional areas. Yeah.
your hobbies. If you speak more than one language, put it down. That is so important. Your hobbies should be in line with the job you're applying for. Only if it's related to the position.
And then other experience would be volunteer, for example. If you do that in the community, I like to call it community involvement, but whatever you want to call it. And don't just say the name of the organization, but what do you do for them? Are you a leader? Are you a president, vice president? Are you a member? Do you do stuff? You develop something? You ran the bake sale, whatever it is, to show leadership, for example.
Yes.
You'll put that in there, right?
But
And then like Joan was saying before, language skills. Some of you have wonderful language skills. You definitely want to get that on there. Now, Joan, you can mention here the level of the language skill. Do you really need to say fluent and all that sort of stuff? What do you think?
I think if you're bilingual, that implies that you speak English and Spanish, or if you speak 5 languages, then I would say 3 I speak fluently and 2 I can read, or
yeah, so I tend to use fluent or conversant as words that are modifiers of languages, but yeah, I mean, it's not really necessary to do that. Okay, so those could be other headings.
and this is just a great resource. The library has them, and check them out. Right, Jerry?
So Martin Yates is an author. There are many, obviously. I do like his stuff, his Knock 'em Dead series, and the library, most of the libraries will have his series, and he does tend to update them as time goes by. So if you're looking to get a book from the library for free or buy it online, these are ones we will recommend. And you can see down on the bottom, Joan has mentioned it's Simon & Schuster and where you can find that online. And they're not real expensive. And he gives many, many, many examples why you do, like we're trying to mention here, why you put things in a certain way, all the applicant tracking, all that sort of thing. Okay, Joe, now we're going to go ahead.
With job applications, and these days, they're all online, pretty much. you need, if you're going to be filling them out online, whether you're at home or someplace else, you need to make sure you should have done your resume. You have to register with the job or company website, and you have to create an online account. And please remember your login name and your password. So write them down. This is really important because many times they'll update it or you'll want to check something. So I can't, I have no idea how many clients we work with who forgot their login name or their password.
Right. It's kind of basic information,
Yeah.
but
But
it's so true. And
Eh.
how many hours should you, and for those of you who've done this, like I have already, fill these out. Joan, any sense of typically how much time it takes to fill out one of these?
well, we're saying 2 hours, but it depends. Sometimes, and what's really frustrating, they'll ask you the same question multiple times in different ways. So it's important to proof it, read it over carefully. And if they ask your age or when you graduated, sometimes if you don't put it in, it won't let you continue. So at that point, I'd say just forget about the job. I don't know how you feel about that, Jerry. But
Well,
if they block you at one point and say, and you can't get to your age, then I think they're saying that they don't want you.
yeah. And that's another kind of age discrimination part that companies are able to do on their websites that kind of eliminate people. And some of you, I'm sure, have seen that before. And the other thing I'll mention is the references. When you fill these things out, often you'll need that. Let me skip ahead here. And I think we have a little bit more in that regard, right?
Yes. And sometimes you can just take your resume and download it, but other times they want you to manually put it in and you have to. That's why it's nice if you remember your login name and your password, because you don't have to do it all at one time. You can come back and finish later.
Yeah.
And
So
they are a lot of companies now are giving you sort of an online personality test. And it's
right.
hard to figure out what they want, but you have to take it.
Yeah. So they're legally, they can ask you to do certain things. These psychological personality tests, legally they can ask you for that. So be aware that might be part of the application process that takes more time.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly make sure your references know you're using them on applications, because often they'll be called or emailed about you. And all of a sudden they're getting a surprise like, oh, by the way, somebody so-and-so has applied for a job at Home Depot. Do you know who this person is? So what I tell people, and Joan, you can mention here too, is I tell people when you ask the person to get permission to use their reference, send them a copy of your resume or give them a copy so they at least have something to work with about you in case that employer that's contacting them asks more detailed questions.
And I just had someone who I give a reference to, they needed my address also, which I thought was rather unique.
Right, because your address isn't going to be on your resume probably.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So this takes time. It can be highly frustrating, but you want to assemble all your materials ahead of time. And after you do it once or twice, it does move along. You see a pattern of how these companies are doing this sort of thing.
But please keep track of your password and login. I also don't think you should use the same password each time. I think you should have a different one and just make a note.
Okay. So let's move ahead here to the next slide, I think is the actual thing. There we are.
These are just samples of applications.
So we have Subway here, and it would take a second for you to take a look at this, but you'll see how they have it laid out, personal information, and there it is, date of birth. So right at near the top, and you'll see this. And like Joan is saying, leave it blank, put it in, it's up to you. But there you are.
In many cases, if you leave it blank, it won't let you continue. Have had people have that problem.
If it's a paper document, it's easier to skip than online. And then the other thing you're going to be faced with is when are you available? This is an hourly job at Subway, right? And many of these are. So you really need to think ahead. Will I work like at night, on the weekend, on certain days of religious observance, whatever it might be? think ahead of what you're really going to put in there and the hours. So important. Instead of saying any hours, I'll work at 3 in the morning, uh, put something to work with there, right? What hours I'm working, I'm open 7:30 to 6:30 a.m. to p.m. or something. Give them something to work with, because sometimes that eliminates you too. You won't work certain days or you can't work certain hours, right, Joan? This happens all the
Yes,
time.
yes.
So this is, and then school most recently attended could be your high school, your college, whatever, um, where you've worked in the past. So you need to have a good record of that,
That's why
how
you have
much
your
you're
resume.
making.
Yes.
Yep. So this is where your resume comes in. And then over on the left-hand side, what are you applying for? Okay, personal information again, have that ready to go. Now, look at what it says, current qualifications. You see that? Qualifications could include those transferable skills, right? So it's not just, oh, I know how to do accounting 101 or something, but it could be something else. Maybe you learn QuickBooks and you'd want to put that in. See? So some of these transferables can go into something like current qualifications. You were a greeter at Walmart. Okay, that's a good skill, working with the public. That's something you'd want to put in. So think about that. And then you'll see there, when are you available to work part-time, full-time? You need to think about that ahead of time, right? Are you working remotely like we are today, right? Are you open to that? Do you have technology to work remotely? That's going to be a bigger deal with some employers, not all, but some, that you can do that, right? And there's your previous employment. And now, Joan, I'm going to ask you, what do you tell people about reason for leaving their job?
Well, it depends. What you want to do is be very gracious. You could say, well, for one thing, if you're laid off,
Yeah,
that's honest. But if you quit for some reason, don't go blaming your previous employer. You have to keep it very gracious.
right.
Just
This
decided
will,
to find other opportunities.
right. Searching for, because this will come in next week. If you come to the interviewing session next Thursday, that's one of the questions. Why did you leave your current employer in an interview, right? Maybe you've already had to answer that. Well, here it is on the form. So you need to think ahead what you're going to say and not denigrate the previous employer, but say I'm looking for a better opportunity. Different hours. I didn't want to work at 3 in
Right.
the morning or something like
Or I
that.
wanted to expand my potential. That's always good.
Right, yeah, there you go. And then on references, can they contact your reference? So here you get into the question of your current boss. What do you say to your current boss or current coworkers? So you need to think ahead on this if you haven't already. Who are you going to put there and can they be contacted? Because you definitely want them contacted. They're going to pitch for you. They're going to say you're wonderful, right? So you need to think about then, what are you going to tell your current boss or not? And that comes to play here. So be aware of that. Okay. Joan, anything else on that?
No, I think.
Okay, so that's really important for those of you that are going to have to do this. Is a big factor. It's not just a resume. There's more to it, as you know. Okay. Now, this is one, if you haven't done a cover letter, you should do it for every application, every resume that you write. So, Joan?
Well, I think this is the hardest part of applying for jobs because you need to personalize it for each employer. So basically, I always say you're more or less sucking up to the employer. You've got to research the company you're applying for and then explain why you would be a good match. It's really important. And you don't want to repeat what's on your resume. You want to be more detailed. You have to show you've studied the company and and explain why your skills would make their company more profitable.
All right, so here we are.
Now, of course, we picked an easy one, but and again, you wanted one page, maybe no more than 2-3 paragraphs, short, to the point. But you also want to mention that you're really familiar with the company you're applying for. You have to search and go online, check their websites to see if they've been expanding, or if they bought out another company. So this is what percentage does the cover letter make, Jerry, to get the
Right.
job?
So again, you don't know if they're going to read it. Some will, some won't. You don't know if their computer system will read it or not, but you have to assume they will. So it's a business letter, as you can see the outline. And the first paragraph is the lead or the hook, showing them, as Joan said, you know about the company, and that's why you're applying. You really like the company. You know what they do, their product or service. So it's a marketing document. You're trying to convince the reader to give you an interview, right? So that's the idea behind the cover letter. It's telling them what you have to offer, showing good written skills, no typos and spelling and all that sort of thing.
And your
In a
keyword.
concise and keywords. Again, remember those keywords. Now, this one I'll mention is a little different. For those of you that have work experience, you might consider this called the T cover letter, and you can Google this again. And it's an excellent way to highlight your background related to a specific job. So you still have the same outline, the summary, and so on. But let me move ahead one here. Look at this. In 2 columns now. So this is probably won't work for the applicant tracking, but for a human being, an actual person reading it, it could work. So on the left column, you bring out bullet points from the job description, as you see there. But then on the right-hand side, you tell the employer why you think you can do that, why you're qualified. So you call it my qualifications. So it's like 2 columns instead of paragraph format in your cover letter. It's like column format. And it's a way to show correlation. They want you to do this, you've done it. You've done it somewhere else. So again, the idea of transferable. I did it somewhere at a company X. I can do it for you, company Y. So if you have work experience, not as easy if you're a new grad, but if you have work experience in the field that you're applying to, this might be one to consider. It's called the T cover letter. So take a look at that online again. I think it might help you out in some regard. Okay, and finally today, LinkedIn. All right, and unfortunately they put me on. This is mine. I was hoping you'd have another one on here, Joan. But
Sorry,
anyway.
since I did it, I used yours.
So I'm the victim here. But anyway, so picture at the top, right? My brand or summary or whatever. Now I have a job. I work at College of Lake County. But in your case, you would put in keywords, just like the summary possibly on your resume. And you notice I have 500 plus connections. That's a really good goal. You definitely want to use this for connecting with people. And then down below, they give you an option for your skills. And here comes current job skills as well as transferable skills. You definitely want to get them in there. And then what have you done? Your accomplishments, or if you would, your highlights.
And this is where you could put in, if you had something published, this is where you can put a link to something you've done.
Right.
And I think that's really important. Or just a frame grab, but if you've done any kind of writing, this would be a great place to put it in.
There you go. And I use PowerPoints is what I put in mine. So here they are, featured it's called. And we do workshops and so on. And I just put it in there as a way to highlight what I've done. The About Me section, keywords, things you can do. I'm using bullet points. You can write it out as a paragraph, however you want to do it. But who are you? What makes you different than the other 700 million people that are on LinkedIn, right? There's over 700 million people on LinkedIn now. Just be aware of that. And then down below, what are you doing? So I like to do a lot of, from my network, passing along job items, what's going on in the world of career services. So it's a great way to start making connections with Okay, and then here's an example. This could be part of your resume. This is a place where you can put more than just a couple of jobs. So you can see some of the stuff that I've done. Again, bullet points, give them keywords if you can, right? So it's not everything. You decide how long you want to make it. People scroll down and look at this stuff to see where you've been. And you'll notice under College of Lake County, I also put in a workshop I did for international students. You can put that right in to the text. This is a PowerPoint, but think about that as a way to show off what you've done at an employer if you have some activity that you'd like to highlight. Okay. And Joan, you want to mention about the
Yes, well,
extra?
Wayne Breitbart, I guess he says in what, 2 months he can get you a job through LinkedIn. But what I like about it is you can buy the book, you can borrow it from the library, but he has a lot of good points that you can just read on his website. You don't even have to pay anything. He's got
Right.
some very good ideas.
Yep. So it's called the powerformula.net. You can jot that down, take a look at it. He's a very good presenter. For those of you from Glenview, he's presented at the Glenview Library recently in the last year and always has a large audience. And the idea is, though, he gives you great tips. You can get on his listserv, and he does a weekly or a couple of weeks tips on how to use LinkedIn, what's happening with it. So I really like him. There's a lot of books on LinkedIn, but this is one that your library would have and something to consider.
And this is a good idea to look for alumni groups, to see people you know. You go into groups in LinkedIn and say you went to Oakton Community College, check the alumni. See if there are people you know. You can see what they're doing. What's really good, you can message someone, or you could just check out people and see where they're working. It's an excellent resource.
So
And you can certainly message someone. Yes, we have an example later.
good networking tool, no doubt about it. Absolutely. Here's something you might want to just note again from Breitbart and others, how to connect to people that don't know you. On LinkedIn, you can send them a little message. Joan, this is an example, right?
Yes, right. It's simple. And you mentioned why, if you're an alumni, I just think it's interesting to go through and see what people who went to your school or were in your business are doing, and see what companies they're working for.
Yeah. So it's a great way to build your network of people that don't know who you are. And then the next step, as you'll see in Breitbart's book, is not just connect with them, but go back and start a conversation through LinkedIn to get them to know you as an actual person who's credible, who is then looking, and when a job comes up, they'll remember you instead of the 100 resumes sitting on the pile from Indeed or Simply Hired.
And these are just other, you can apply, companies are on, what's interesting is on LinkedIn, you can see jobs, say a company, and you can see if your skills match, how many people have applied and how many employees are in the company. And you can read the job description. I think it's really interesting. You can also see if the person who's hiring went to your school. And you can customize your resume and cover letter. It's just another way of doing it. It's depressing to see how many people have applied, but it gives you a more realistic idea of who you're competing against.
Okay, so we've covered it. I imagine there'll be some chat box questions, but before we go to that, on the bottom of the screen, you'll see the 4 libraries, their contact information that are sponsoring this series. And we hope that you will connect for individual help or to, use the resources of the library, as Mike was mentioning last week on Tremendous Skokie, and all the libraries have wonderful resources, remote or in person. And why not take advantage of that? You're living right here in the area, and it's a great opportunity. Okay, Joan, any other comments in that regard?
No, any questions? I work for the Skokie Library. I'd be glad to, if you contact Michael. I've been working with people online through the phone, helping them with their resume and job search. So
Right. and I do Glenview. So if you're in Glenview and you want to have a connection, I'm doing them Zoom right now, not in person. And I'd be happy to do 2 days a month at Skokie. I'm sorry, at Glenview online.
Oh, and I'm also now at Wilmette. So, and I believe that if you're in from Chicago, we also will work with you.
There you go. Okay, so
Any questions?
stop that. And let's see here. Okay. Mike, anything here that we want to?
Yeah, hi Jerry. Someone had a question about like using tenses in a resume, like past tenses, if you're actually working for a company.
Joan?
Yeah, I think it's important to put a tense. If it's a company you worked for, you use the past tense. If it's current, you'd use your current. I think that's important because I think it's good grammar, and I think grammar is important. As a writer, I think it's important.
Yep.
Jerry?
I would agree.
Okay. Anything else?
LinkedIn subscription. I see one on there from Gonka, I think it is. Yeah, the LinkedIn has a premium that some people like. It gives you access to more employers directly. I have not used it extensively, but it does offer you opportunity to connect with people differently than the regular LinkedIn, which is free.
I've used
So basically, it's your call. Sometimes LinkedIn will offer it for free, right, Joan? You can
well,
get it?
that's what I've used when I've used it for the 1 month introductory offer. I just warned that it's really tricky to get out of it. You can, but they don't make it easy. I would just take it for 1 month and see. I don't think it's that critical. But if you can get it for free and keep track of how you've done it, then you can delete it later.
Yeah, okay. And there's some good suggestions on here about filling out apps, Dina, and you know, absolutely every application is different, and you just have to be aware of whether it'll kick you out, as Joan was saying, if you do it a certain way. We have another question here from Susie.
Virtual vocations, that I'm not familiar with.
Pardon me?
David Cohen said he's thinking of joining virtual vocations for online position. I'm not familiar with that.
Not familiar with that one, David. But Susie Schwartz has one on, do you include the separate reference page when you apply, or only when they ask for it? My answer would be it depends. Sometimes the employer will ask up front, but generally if it's for a salary job where you're using a resume, it may come later as you apply. If you make the cut, so to speak, you get an interview and they like you and you have a chance to be hired, now they want to see a reference. They want to get the page.
Mm-hmm.
Joan?
I agree. I had read that you don't put your references on normally because then once you get the interview, then you would use your reference.
Yeah, so that one I think is, it depends on really what the company wants from you right away or down the road. And now the way it's virtual, they're just screening people now in many cases. It's not, you don't need to give them everything right away.
Dina Sims is talking about a specific number of bullet points to fit on one page. Yes, I do think that your bullet points, you don't want to repeat the same, even if you've done the same job for 2 different things, talk about different things you've done in each job. And I would say, I try to keep it to 3 to 4 bullets per job.
Yeah, I would agree. I think 3 to 4 is plenty. And sometimes it'd be a little more. It depends. If you're in a technical area and they need to see more technical skills, yeah, maybe sometimes that works. But generally 3 or 4 bullet points is sufficient.
What I've discovered, if people have had the same type of career for multiple companies, you don't want to, what you did for one company, try not to repeat the same, come up with some different skills the second time, so you're not redundant.
Yeah, yeah. So I think,
less, here's one, Karen Johnson, is it okay to have less bullet points per job?
Oh, sure.
But I'm looking for a change and I want more space. I think that would be, we go more into the transferable skills then.
Yeah,
Um,
Yeah.
you
You
don't
can-
have to have an equal number of bullets for each job, no.
no. It can vary depending on the importance of the job related to what you're looking to get into. Yeah.
Right, how relevant it is to the job.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Okay. Anything else?
I believe
Okay.
everybody's going to get a copy of the PowerPoint, so you'll have it.
Yes. Okay. Well, our time is just about up. And just thank you all again for participating and the questions. And we hope we are able to help you get a handle on the this part of your job search.
Yeah, and good luck. And we're available if you need help.
Right. So thank you all. Appreciate it.